The fun and fascinating world of HR compliance. One of the things that can be most costly for a business and actually catastrophic is an employee who files a lawsuit and has a good case because the company did not take the steps to protect themselves. My business partner Yolanda and I have put together a process and a system that protects small businesses without restricting them. So typically when people think of HR, you think of it as the no department, or the individuals that are going to tell you what you can't do more than what you can do. We take an approach of educating you, and so if a small business owner wants to fire someone who is a protected class and they never documented the performance issue and all of their performance evaluations are 5 out of 5, I'm not going to tell you that you cannot terminate that person, but I am going to tell you the consequences if that person decides to file a claim against you and whether or not you're protected based off of the documentation that you have. Today I'm going to go over 5 of the most common mistakes made by businesses in the world of human resources. But before I go into that, a lot of the prospective clients that we talk to or in trainings like this don't really think that there's a need for HR compliance. They'll say, well, I only have 2 or 3 employees, so I don't have to worry about it because federal law says you have to have 15 employees or more. Or we've never had an issue in the past, we've been doing business for 9 years, so why do we now need this service? And I actually had a meeting yesterday with a client who says, we have 5 different people handling human resources right now. None of them are HR professionals, but this is the way we've done it for almost 10 years. But recently, one manager gave employees paid time off to study for a prep test. Another manager said, no, you have to take vacation to prepare for your test. A person who is a protected class said, wait a minute, you have these individuals who are getting this time paid, and because I am this protected class, you're telling me that I have to take vacation. And that actually prompted the meeting with me because all 5 of the individuals who are in charge of human resources had no reply and no answer for the individual. And so we met yesterday so that they could get back to them timely with a response that protects the business and really validates the reason why the differences were made. The differences were not about the person being a protected class. It was at the discretion of each individual manager. Some stats that people typically don't know, which actually shock and surprise me. Labor and employment law is the 2nd highest pending litigation in the court system today in the U.S. And every single employment law attorney that I know and have talked to are the busiest that they have ever been on both the corporate and the employee side. I even had one person that I talked to say that this is supposed to be his downtime, and he is more busy today than he has ever been. A lot of things and factors play into that, given the economy and layoffs and things like that. But even here in the state of Illinois, a law was recently passed and just went into effect that gives employees the right to sue an employer directly for wage and hour issues, instead of going and filing claims with the Department of Labor and having the Department of Labor investigate. So what this means for a small business owner is if someone feels that you're not paying their overtime or their hours the way that you should, they no longer need to go through the lengthy process of the Department of Labor investigating and justifying the claim. They can go to whoever or whatever attorney says, yes, I will take on your case, and they can sue you directly on their own behalf or as a class action lawsuit for everyone who works in your company. Those are frightening things and power that are now being given to the employee. And there are also some federal regulations that also give employees the right to sue an employer directly. And so what I try to do in the course of sessions like this and meeting with business owners is to really talk about practical ways that you can protect yourself. And so the first and most common mistake that's made in small business is not complying with government regulations. Often this is not done on purpose, but unfortunately ignorance is not a defense. So you can't go into court and say, I just didn't know I was supposed to pay overtime for over 40 hours, because the judge is going to say, well, did you Google it? Did you consult with an attorney? Have you talked to an HR consulting firm? There are many avenues that help to educate small business owners. And so just saying that you weren't clear on what the regulation was is no longer valid. Another big thing is hiring the wrong person. And I'm sure there are people out there right now that can think of instances where they had a superstar in the interview, and this person was going to take the company to the next level, and they were absolutely fantastic. And you hire them, and 30 days in, you're like, what the heck did I just do? And this person is not going to work, and now I need to terminate him. And how am I going to do that? So some of the best ways in hiring, when you figure out you've hired the wrong person, is to really document what the performance issues are. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out form, and we have a progressive discipline process, so I have to talk to them 30 times before I can terminate. It's simply having a conversation with that person about whatever the deficiencies are, sending them a quick email that says, just to recap, these are the issues that I wanted to point out to you today, and here are the follow-up steps that we're going to take. Let's touch base in 2 weeks. You have now documented a performance issue that will protect you if that person comes back and says, no, wait a minute, he fired me because I told him that I had children and I was going to get to work late every day because of daycare issues. Another thing that is often overlooked in small business is the recruiting process itself and screening candidates. So most people think, I'm a small business, I don't want to pay the $35 to get the background check done, and then you don't. And then you are responsible and liable for anything that's done by that employee. And again, ignorance is not a defense. So you can't say, well, we didn't do a background check and I didn't know these things. I met with a prospective client who had an individual working for them for 5 years, did great, and all of a sudden he started acting really crazy, very poisonous amongst the employees, very combative. And it turns out that before he started working for them, he had just spent a lot of years in prison for attempted murder, where he beat someone with a baseball bat. And these individuals had him going into homes where he's with your children, you know, your wife, your husband, and installing HVAC systems, and they knew absolutely nothing about him. It's a frightening thing, and I actually sat in the conversation and wanted to cringe and like slap her because they really left themselves vulnerable to this employee, all because they wanted to save the $30 on a background check. Thankfully, there was no harm done, and he was terminated for multiple reasons, but that's also a situation that could have led to workplace violence, which again, the company would have been liable for. And so there are many things that you can do in the screening process. Creating an interview process that gets to the core of who that person is and what they're actually going to be able to contribute to your organization. I like to call it the interview phase. And so when you sit down with someone, and I'm really good at this because I do this for a living, but I can sit down and tell you everything that I know you want to hear. And I do it because I let you talk first. And so you give me everything about your ideal client or your ideal employee, what you want from them, how you want them to deliver, and then I'll sit there and regurgitate everything you just told me and put it in my own words. And so now I look stellar. And I am not the only one that knows how to do that. And so I work to look at, you know, the nonverbal cues. Is this person making eye contact? I ask behavioral-based questions because that's the best indicator of future behavior. And I also document all of that. So if something does happen and the person turns out to be completely crazy, which there's always a 50-50 that is the case, I'm able to say, I'm terminating you and this is why. I can justify why I've hired you. Now I can justify why I'm terminating you. And then you don't really have a case against me. Another common thing, especially right now, is misclassifying employees. And this can be, I don't want to pay payroll taxes, so I'm going to call everybody a 1099 contractor. And that works for me. I don't care that it's the receptionist who, you know, is making $8 an hour. This person is going to be classified as a contractor. The IRS has some really interesting guidelines on 1099 contractor versus employee. The top 3 things to look at is the behavior of the person. Is that person working in your office every day? Do they have some type of schedule that you've given them that they have to stick to? Are they doing a position that is so vital to your organization that without them, you cannot run your business? The second thing you look at is your control. Are you telling them when to come to work? Work schedules, doing in-depth trainings, letting them come in and do exactly the way you want things done. And then the final thing is financial. How are you paying them? Are you running them through your payroll system? Are you having them fill out a W-9 and then they invoice you monthly? The IRS really looks at the behavior more than they do anything else. So you can have a contract that says that you're a 1099 contractor, everybody can sign it, everyone's in agreement, and then when you get audited, they come through and say, absolutely not, this person was not a 1099 contractor, and you can be fined for that. And then the second thing is exempt versus non-exempt. So some employers think, well, I'll just give them a salary, I'll pay them the same thing every 2 weeks, and so now they're exempt. But there are actually tests that you need to apply to each person to make sure that you're classifying them correctly. Typically with a wage and hour issue of not paying overtime, there's up to $10,000 just right off the bat for having the violation. And then you can be charged up to $1,100 per person per incident for anything that happens during the course of that person's employment. And oftentimes if they find that you're doing it wrong in 2010, they're going to figure that you were doing it wrong in 2009, 8, 7, and 6. And so they'll come back and they'll request more payroll records because now they want to see, well, what has this company been doing? It really depends on who the auditor is. I've had great auditors that I've been able to chum up and, let's do lunch and let's talk over this issue because I know I'm wrong and I don't want to try to minimize how much money I'm going to pay. And then I've had other ones that are like, don't talk to me, just bring me your payroll records, close me in this office, I will let you know when I'm done. So it's really kind of the luck of the draw on what you get. And easy ways to make sure that you are protected in this category is really look for your 1099 contractors. Are they truly a contractor based off of the IRS definition? If you don't know that, you should really ask someone because those fees and fines aren't very well defined. So I can't sit here and tell you how much you may or may not pay. I can tell you that I had an incident where we had 4 individuals who were deemed misclassified, and it cost the company $20,000. And that was $20,000 of unbudgeted money that we ended up taking from the employees in another spot to cover that bill. And then after that, everyone was calling, and every regulator wanted to see my records and what I'm doing, and it really opened up a snowball effect on, we found this one thing, so they must be doing something else wrong. And it was like the worst 6 months of my life trying to justify to both federal and state agencies that I promised this was the only thing that we were doing wrong. And then for your classifying employees, there's a really strict test, and it's based off of how much the employee makes. I believe if an employee makes over $455 a week, they can be exempt, but that's only one part of the test. You also have to go through and look at what their responsibilities are. Most people who are exempt have the ability to hire, fire, they train, they manage others. It's not going to be, the receptionist, but it could be your executive admin assistant because she has more power and control over things in the business because she's an extension of you. So really understanding that and applying that test to every employee that you have is really important. And the way you document that is just through the job description. Someone who is not going to be exempt is going to have some basic functions like filing, answering the telephone, and all of that good stuff. But then someone who is managing a team or a region or who has people reporting to them, they interview, they hire, they fire, those are people who can be exempt. The fourth thing is lack of documentation, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to document. I have sat in rooms, we had an EEOC charge against us for discriminatory hiring practices, and I sat with our corporate counsel with all of my documentation on the entire process, how we interviewed this person, that we had standard interview questions for everybody. The person actually was a little crazy in the interview, and that was one of the reasons why the decision was made not to hire them. But this person said it's because I'm a black male, and I don't care that she was a black woman, she doesn't like black men either. And that was his claim. And he went to the EEOC. The EEOC said you have a right to sue. He went to an attorney, and then next thing you know, I'm sitting with my attorney addressing the practices and the processes that we have, and the individual's case went nowhere after his attorney talked to our attorney and saw all of the documentation we had, not just on his interview process, but the interview process company-wide across 9 states covering 800 employees. And there was just a whole host of things that we were able to list to show that we do not discriminate. I even went as far as to document how many minorities we have working within the region, how many minority managers that we have throughout the company, and things like that are the documentation that you need to protect yourself, and it saved us a lot of money. It took me a lot of time, but it saved us a lot of money as an organization. And then the final thing, which I think is really important today, is not motivating your employees and not valuing them. As the economy starts to turn, jobs are going to be created, and people who have been unhappy, who have been overworked, and just haven't said anything because they were so scared that they were going to lose their jobs, are going to be looking for new jobs. And they're going to walk out with all of the knowledge and everything that you have invested in them. And while they may spend 2 weeks training a person, if anyone has ever been trained by someone who has resigned, which I have, they completely check out. I even had one lady that left me sitting at a desk for a week and a half while she was out shopping, doing lunch, or I have no idea what. And then my first day by myself, the VP comes in and he's like, okay, so you know everything Tracy knew, right? And it's like, no, actually I don't. He's like, okay, well now you're going to process payroll for 3,000 people. Let's see how that works. And it's a frightening experience. She did payroll for 25 years and had systems, processes in place, showed me absolutely nothing. And so it took me almost 6 months to get it right. And that was 6 months of long lines of angry people yelling at me every other Friday. All of that could have been averted. She left because she didn't feel valued. She didn't feel appreciated anymore. No one came by and said, good job. You know, she was a well-oiled machine. Nobody had to worry about her, and she was just in her back office. Those are the types of things that cost you money. It costs thousands of dollars in employees standing in line and not at work, waiting for me to cut them, checks right there on the spot. The time that it took for the accountants to cut the checks. I mean, there was just a lot of time spent that could have been averted because she would not have left had she felt appreciated. And so these are things that you may not think that there's a hard dollar cost to someone walking out your door, but there truly, truly is. And it's not about money with most employees, and so you can put a recognition program in place that'll cost you like $500 a year because you're ordering pizza once a month, or you're passing out little $5 Visa gift cards that say, thank you, I really appreciate what you did today, or our client had a great comment about you and I want to reward you for it. As silly as Employee of the Month programs are, to me at least, employees truly value having their picture on the wall or a special comment being made to them by a manager. So motivating employees does not have to be about money. There's a cost-effective way to do it. And that's the fifth thing that I think is really important. And then lastly, there is an increase in federal and state oversight of employment law. It is what it is. We all know that governments, both local and federal, are stretched for money. A great way to get money is to find people who are not being compliant. As business owners, if you don't educate yourselves and if you don't know, you leave yourself victim to just paying, in some cases, losing your business over something that I think is really simple to put into place. And so finally, I think it's critical to not only be aware, but to be proactive and then make sure you're always compliant. Thank you. I'm done. I did it in less time. Yay. Any questions?
What are your thoughts on employer handbooks?
Oh, I have an interesting thought on handbooks. I think that everyone needs to have one, and I think that the handbook needs to have all of the legally stuff that you want to protect yourselves. But I also think the handbook cannot be 100% black and white. This is our policy. If you don't do this, that's it. Because each situation is different. As an HR professional, you get challenging things that come into your office, and sometimes there is nothing in the handbook about it. So you want to give yourself the flexibility to apply your policies to everyone, but then also have the key things in place to protect yourself.
one last thing.
Mhm.
If you have an employee, like you mentioned, who's leaving and didn't help you with the transition, wouldn't you have her subject to a severance agreement? And they can continue upon her receiving a severance payment of helping the new person train.
You can. One of the severance agreements are great, but for me, it kind of locks you into setting precedent and needing to be consistent across the board. I typically don't call those things severances. It can be a transitional bonus that is contingent upon you completing all of these things. But one of the most important things in that scenario is to set a plan and have that person document what you need them to teach the other person, because they may say, you know what, I hate this place so much, I don't care how much money they're trying to give me, it's not worth it, I'm not coming back. And so I have actually transitioned a person, which was a very touchy subject, and I had her create an HR procedures manual for me that gave me A to Z everything that she did in the event that she did not want her transitional bonus and decided to leave, so that I wouldn't be left trying to figure everything out. So, but I don't really recommend severances or using the severance terminology because it just locks you into too much. But finding creative ways, including transitional bonuses and retention bonuses and some other good stuff, gives you the flexibility to apply things differently to each person in each situation.
Great point.
Thank you.